We're here with Joe Morrissey. Fighting Joe is back. Joe, great to have you with us.
John, good to be back here on the John Fredericks Show, and you're looking great. You continue to lose a few lbs. Good for you.
A little bit here and there as we travel around the country in our Open America tour. Joe, I want to get to a lot for us to go over today. I want to start with China and the fact that the Chinese Communist Party, it now appears from a lot of evidence, they knew about this virus. They knew it was person-to-person contact. They locked down Wuhan. They wouldn't let Wuhan residents travel outside of Wuhan to mainland China. They couldn't go to Beijing, but they let them fly internationally, come to the U.S., go to the United Kingdom, go to Europe, Italy, Middle East, to infect the world, it appears. What do you think of that? And are we going to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable, Joe?
John, the Communist Party has to be held accountable for what they did. Mm-hmm. No questions, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Let's be clear what occurred. It was back on November 17th that the first case of COVID-19 appeared in China's Hubei province, November 17th. And at that time, the government officials knew that it was capable of human-to-human contact. They did nothing. And when Chinese doctors tried to alert the other organizations, not just the WHO, but other worldwide health organizations, Centers for Disease Control across the world, instead of being given a gold star or medal or attaboy for doing that, they were punished. Doctors were punished for alerting the rest of the world. And so let's look at the cost to the United States. Mm-hmm. We've got 30 million people that are unemployed because of COVID-19. We have close to 85,000 deaths mm-hmm. in our country. Mm-hmm. This worldwide contagion is the fault of the Chinese government. And here's why. We don't blame Beijing for the viral outbreak. That would be nonsense. And we don't. What we blame the Chinese government for is lying to the world and proactively trying to impede the global response to it. And that's disgraceful.
Why did they do that?
For pride, because they didn't want to be seen as the area of the world where this contagion developed. It was, I don't know, hubris? Who knows?
And they didn't want to be the only country with it, right?
Sure.
So the other thing is, it appears now that they vacuumed up all the PPEs all over the globe, and now they're selling them at an obscene profit back.
Yeah, that's another thing. We know where this pandemic began, all right? And we know that as early as January 14th, the World Health Organization, as a result of a communication with the Beijing government, said that Chinese authorities have found no human-to-human contact.
Which was a lie.
An outright lie. At that point, 1,700 Chinese health officials, doctors and nurses, had been infected. 1,700 by January 15th, but there's no human-to-human contact. And then on January 15th, the day after, the head of the Chinese Center for Disease Control, the counterpart of the United States Center for Disease Control, said that the risk of human-to-human contact is very, very rare. That's another lie. But I'll tell you what I think is the one factor that most leads to the conclusion that they should be held accountable and should be sued is the following. They delayed sending samples, the Chinese Beijing government, samples of the virus to the United States. Wouldn't send it. So that our CDC could examine this contagion. And when they did that, we had to use a back channel. The United States government, the United States, one of our universities in Texas, the University of Texas, had a contract with a laboratory in China. So they agreed to send the samples there. The Chinese government found out about that and squashed it. Yeah. So there's too many reasons why the Chinese government was purposely and proactively engaged in deceiving the world that they should, as a reason why they should not be held accountable.
So how do we hold them accountable?
Well,
some have suggested stripping China of its sovereign immunity. Some have suggested freezing the assets of its leaders. Some have said if we strip their sovereign immunity, then Americans can sue them because they're not going to get any money out of them. What are the options we have?
Well, first of all,
do any of those work?
Short answer, yes, they do work. And you are correct. The Chinese government has a statutorily granted, from Congress, a statutory granted sovereign immunity. Eliminate it. Well, Joe, is there any precedent for that? There absolutely is. In 2016, Congress passed the Justices Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. Okay.
So that allowed Americans to sue the Saudis, right?
Exactly, after 9/11.
9/11.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen until 2016.
Yes.
So that took 16 years.
Okay, right, but they did it. That bill should be floating in Congress right now to strip China of its statutory granted sovereign immunity.
Right.
All right, and then allow them to be sued. In fact, the first lawsuits have already been filed.
What about this idea of seizing assets? You can't cancel their debt because that has world reverberations. Nobody would buy our debt if they think that we can just cancel it. So I really understand that. But Joe, what about this idea, like we did with Iranian diplomats, where we just froze their assets, like individuals, not the government?
Well, it's a little bit out of my bailiwick, okay?
Right.
And it sounds very tempting to say freeze all of their assets for what they did. Very tempting. However, we operate by due process in this country, okay? Not only to our own sovereign citizens, but to others, okay? We've got a strong case. As I just said, United States healthcare workers have filed a class action suit against the Beijing government because of their proactive endeavors to prevent this contagion from spreading. With whether we freeze individuals' assets or government's assets, we'll see. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you this, there was an act of terrorism against the United States at 9/11. Mm-hmm. This is no different. Mm-hmm. It is an act of biological terrorism against the United States and other countries, not because they manufactured the contagion in a laboratory. I don't believe there's any evidence that they did that. There is overwhelming evidence that they prevented that information from being disseminated to the world, and it is disgraceful.
I mean, there's.
I don't think disgraceful is the right word, John.
I don't think
when
so.
you have 85,000 people in the United States,
and the entire economy has collapsed,
and the world, the number of people that have died around the world.
I mean, it's like beyond that, and that, like Steve Bannon says, 95% of the havoc that's been wreaked on the world and death and destruction and economic despair could have been avoided had they been upfront about it, from day one. With the HO, with the WHO, and everything else. Two questions.
Let me just add this one point,
yes,
and that's excellent, John. There was a University of Southampton study that found if Beijing had just acted 3 weeks earlier, we've already shown that the first reported death was in November 17th, and they delayed for over 2 months. And we're still obfuscating then. But if they had just let World Health Organizations know 3 weeks earlier, this Southampton study said that 95% of the virus could have been contained, 95% of lives saved, if they just acted 3 weeks earlier.
95%?
Yeah.
Just three weeks.
Yeah, and instead of the 3 months that they delayed.
It's really unbelievable.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but I wanted to
that's okay.
share that little vignette with the listening audience.
It's good to have you here. We're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Fight Joe Morrissey is with us. Also, he's a state senator of Petersburg. Do your constituents, what are they saying to you about this?
John, we're in the office every day.
I know you talk to your constituents all day long. That's why
we've got three
That's
staff.
why I love having you.
We spend about 3.5, 4 hours a day dealing with COVID-19 issues. But we do, you know me. I like action. I can't stand people just talking about things, all right? We've tried to do our part by acting. We've had over 10 food giveaways where we have collected food. The first one was at the down in Petersburg. We had a 24-foot trailer. We came down with pallets and pallets of food. We went to senior centers, assisted living centers, convalescent centers. We sent out the tables, and we put products out there, everything from peanut butter to pasta to rice to toilet paper to you name it, vitamins. And the people come by with their mask, and they collect it. And then they go back in because we want to keep that senior population from going out to stores because they're the most vulnerable. And we've done that in Petersburg, in Hopewell, and Prince George. We've gone to, I think, 3 or 4 different food banks, churches, and that's all with the seniors that come up and get the groceries. We have another one scheduled for Friday. It's what we can do. We have a Just the Facts, ma'am, portion that I do twice a week from my office on my Facebook, letting people know what the facts are, because sometimes you can get a little rhetoric, you know.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I think so. And so, not you, John.
Of course, because I'm the Godzilla of truth. Do your constituents, do they hold the same view on China that we do? That they hold them?
No, I don't think it's gone that far.
Right, they haven't really thought about that.
Correct.
Right now, they're thinking about how do I get to tomorrow.
Yeah, and let me say this: we cannot disparage our Chinese and Asian brothers and sisters and neighbors and citizens.
This is not the Chinese.
It's not them.
People.
It's
the communist government.
Communist government of Beijing, China, that is responsible
CCP.
for this. Yeah.
The Chinese are fine, hardworking people. They've been under the thumb of totalitarianism. So it isn't the Chinese people. It's the communist Chinese government.
Right.
No question about it.
Let's be clear. I was in the General Assembly. We went in on January 1st week of January, January 8th. It wasn't towards the end of February that it was becoming as, serious as it was. Because I remember in the final days we realized, wow, just how dangerous it is. But think of this. November 17th was the first time that a case of COVID-19 appeared in the Chinese province of Hubei province. November 17th to December to January to February. 3 months, 12 weeks, and America still wasn't. How bad is this, you know? Think of what had happened back in the end of November. If the communist government had told the world, we have a situation here, folks.
Yeah, a situation.
Instead, their doctors did it. Their healthcare professionals did it. They tweeted their colleagues around the world.
Never to be heard from again.
And they were punished or killed.
Because there were 5 of them that went public with it, and they were never heard from again.
Exactly.
To this day, they are expected to have disappeared.
Sure.
For whatever reason.
And I bet they're not in some gulag prison. I bet they have been murdered.
Oh, they're
because
dead.
They had the audacity to come forward and tell
dead.
the truth.
No
so,
question about
do
it.
I think the government should be held accountable? You bet I do.
Excellent. We're with Fightin' Joe Morrissey, State Senator, District 16. That represents Petersburg, Hopewell area of Virginia. He's in the Virginia General Assembly. And, the state Senate, the more mature, sober group, the House caucus of the core, and the exact opposite. There are a lot of crazy people in there. Joe, let's get to another topic, if I may. You were a prosecutor for a long time. You were highly effective. You're one of the best defense attorneys criminal defense attorneys in the history of Virginia. There was a time where you won, I always say this, I inflate the number a little bit, but you won like 52 cases in a row. A huge number. So you were highly effective.
54 juries.
54 jury cases in a row. It's
right, Kier?
Unheard of. And these are criminal trials. This isn't you're up there because somebody overran a red light at a stop sign. These are hard. These criminal. So you won 54 jury trials in a row. When you look at the Michael Flynn case now, and Sidney Powell, what they've come up with, what's your take?
To say that I am dismayed, disappointed, flabbergasted as to what happened to Michael Flynn would be the understatement of the year. What happened to Michael Flynn, and this is not coming from talking heads on the Republican side or Flynn supporters. It's coming from government officials, the court transcripts, what the government revealed finally. What they did to him was a disgrace and a tragedy. And let's just recap for a second. Michael Flynn was a supporter of then candidate Trump. He was very outspoken. He was very clear in his opposition to the way the FBI and DOJ handled the Hillary Clinton matter. Right? And then, as a result of that, it now appears that he came on the FBI's radar because of that. As you recall, there were two, one primary FBI special agent who was involved in the situation and had some ties to the Clinton campaign, and certainly it now shows had it in for Flynn. But let's be clear about this. Our government here doesn't say, we don't like John Fredericks. Therefore, we will investigate John Fredericks. That is not the way prosecutors or government work. What you have is a situation, what we are supposed to do is, there is evidence that there's a crime, that John Fredericks committed a crime, and therefore we will follow the evidence to see if he did it. Not investigate him to see if we can discover some evidence of criminal activity. Am I clear on that?
Yes, very clear.
So what happened with Flynn is that there was no clear case that he was corresponding with Russian officials or involved in any type of conspiracy. And when they went after him and sat him, he wasn't even a target, but when they investigated him and they sat him down, they had no case. They now admit it. No case, no charge. No, he did this. This overt act A, B, C, D occurred. No, they went after him and said, our goal, do we want to get him to lie? We want to trap him? What are we doing here? Never should have had that interview. Mm-hmm. Even James Comey admitted later on that they went around took a circuitous route around White House channels to interview Flynn without an attorney. Okay? It is disgraceful. And then let's be clear about this. They then indict him for lying to an FBI agent. Okay. So, people say, and then he pled guilty. And I've heard this, but he pled guilty. He must be guilty. Oh, really? John, you have a family. Mm-hmm. You have two children that I know of. Joseph is the youngest, a wife. And if the FBI, with all of its resources, came after you and said, if you don't plead guilty, we'll indict you on these 12 felonies, we will bankrupt you trying to defend yourself. We will bankrupt you. You will be homeless. We will put you in a federal prison for 8 years. Do you think you might plead guilty to a misdemeanor or a felony if you and get a suspended sentence?
Yes.
Yes. That's what people do. Some of us don't.
I'd have done it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the resources.
Right. Some of us don't.
Right.
Some of us stand up to the government and say, take your best shot.
Like Bob McDonnell did.
Yeah. And by the way, I put my money where my mouth is. I'm a Democrat. Bob McDonnell, when I last checked, was a Republican. Do you know one of the people that contributed to his defense fund?
Joe Morrissey.
You're speaking to him.
Right.
Now, I remember back in the day when I was defending Joel Harris.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. They went after me. You know who was leading that effort?
Who?
Take a guess.
FBI?
James Comey.
James Comey.
Yeah, and the
Went after
FBI.
you.
Because he was in the U.S. District Attorney's office. And I had the temerity to stand up and say what the FBI is doing to my client is disgraceful and deplorable. And I had a press conference. Comey sent me over an email, text, half an hour before I held the press conference. If you hold the press conference, we're going after you. You know what my response is. You know me, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Take your best shot.
Make my day.
And I went after.
You feel lucky today?
Yeah,
James?
I went after him. I held the press conference, okay, and they went after me. They spent a year investigating me. My law office dragged a dozen people into the federal grand jury, said that I was violating a local rule against pretrial publicity. Do you know how much money I spent?
How much?
$300,000.
Unbelievable.
And you know what they said? Every month, we're going to indict you this month unless you plead guilty. Do you know what I said every month?
What?
What do you think?
Go to hell. Right.
Exactly.
You gave him the New Jersey salute.
That's right. Take your best shot. Mm-hmm. Every month. And that went on for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And then it just ended. Because I did nothing wrong. But people don't have the resources like I had to fight them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's what they do.
That's why.
And then you got
guilty.
that. And they
Plus,
continue.
they said he was going to go after. They said they were going to go after his son.
Right. That's
So it's like you have no choice.
right.
You just
And then
bail.
so you know, if you and here's another thing that I dislike immensely, when the government uses paid informants and people that are guilty of the same crime to get them to testify. And let me tell you something, these people would testify against their mother if it got them out of jail. And anyway, I'm getting away, and I'm sorry to your listening audience for doing this, but it's something that I find offensive. With Michael Flynn, people ask why, but he pled guilty. Now do you understand why?
Yes.
He spent over $1 million defending himself, okay?
He's bankrupt.
Sure he is.
He lost his home.
You know what? And then he switched attorneys, and they fought it.
To Sidney Powell.
They fought it, and they realized what was happening. And they got the discovery, and they got the notes, and they realized that a federal prosecutor said, what's our goal? To trip him up? To get him to lie? We have no crime.
Unbelievable.
And then when they filed a motion and the federal government knew what was going to happen, they came in and they dismissed the charges. What they also should have done is gotten down on their knees, said a Hail Mary for him, and apologized to God, to the country, to the superiors, and to Michael Flynn and his family for what they put him through.
And according to Sidney Powell, his lawyer now, they did this. You know, Michael Flynn was a longtime Democrat before he went with Trump. He held high positions in intelligence in the Obama White House. And so what Sidney Powell was saying in my interview with his attorney yesterday is Flynn was a major threat when Trump got elected because he knew where the bodies were buried. He knew everything because he was part of the Obama administration. He was a Democrat. He knew everything, and he couldn't be in that job.
He was in intelligence. He was in the United States Army for 33 years.
33 years.
He rose through the ranks to brigadier general, and he knew where the bodies were buried.
That's why they went after him.
And they didn't want him to be national security chief.
Right. So they got him out.
How about that? No, they manufactured a case. Let me tell you something.
I mean,
I'm
where do we
looking at
live?
Kiera right now.
This America that we're in, I mean, what?
That's not the way we work in America.
How do we let this go by, though?
Well, it goes by when good people do nothing. Okay? When they see something like that and they don't do anything. I do. I speak out. But John, what happens when you speak out? What happens when you talk about certain agencies, they go after you? I'm telling you right now, I'm looking at everybody in this room, Jew, Kiera, our friends from Japan. If the government wants you and they put 10 FBI agents on you, I am telling you, you look into their background, they will find something. Kiera, I think, is a saint. But I guarantee you, you look into her background, you will find something that you can go after. And then you say, we'll come up with all these charges, plead guilty. There's very few people that fight them.
Isn't that what Joseph Stalin's right-hand man said that was head of his KGB? He said, show me the man, I'll find the crime.
Exactly.
Right? I mean,
yes.
The same thing the KGB did. You want somebody, you point them out to me, I'll find something, I'll put him in the gulag. Done. So it was the same thing. Now,
and with Flynn, back in 2012, he was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Right.
You don't think he knows some of where these bodies are buried?
Damn right.
He knows where the entire graveyard is.